A quiet shift begins in your life long before you ever notice it. One day you simply wake up and realize the pieces of your story are not scattered by accident. They've been gently arranged by something wiser than your plans. And in that moment, logic can't give you answers. But your heart recognizes a familiar whisper. Every challenge, every delay, every unexpected turn begins to feel less like punishment and more like a careful calibration. Like life tuning the strings of an instrument, so the next note will resonate clearly. As you listen now, understand this. You didn't arrive here by coincidence. You crossed a threshold where consciousness begins to synchronize with a broader field of intelligence. It's subtle at first. The way you pause before reacting, the way you breathe instead of panic. These small choices are like tiny ripples on the surface of a vast lake, revealing that your vibration is stabilizing. And when vibration stabilizes, reality shifts. Because the universe does not answer the voice of ego, it answers frequency. For most people, life feels like a storm they must resist. But something in you has softened. You've begun to sense that resistance is not strength. Resistance is fear disguised as control. Imagine a river trying to flow uphill, struggling, forcing, exhausting itself. That's how most of us have lived. But when the river remembers the direction of gravity, it doesn't surrender to weakness. It surrenders to wisdom. It lets the current carry it. And that's what you're learning, how to float instead of fight. As this awareness deepens, decisions feel different. You no longer choose from fear of missing out. You choose from expansion. You feel into possibilities the way fingers trace the edges of fabric, sensing texture, softness, tension. When something aligns with your evolution, your chest expands, your breath deepens, your mind quiets. When something contracts, you don't need explanations. Truth has that kind of texture, smooth, spacious. And this vibrational intelligence is guiding you toward the timeline most coherent with your growth. Most of us grew up thinking intelligence was stored in the brain, but at this level, you begin to know without thinking. Answers appear fully formed, like a memory, returning. You understand systems you never studied. You see patterns you never analyzed. This is not magic, it's connection. Your consciousness is interfacing with the information field beneath physical reality. Instead of climbing ladders of logic, you're tuning your frequency. When your vibration matches the question, the answer arrives instantly. And the more coherent you become, the less you need to prove. Old identities fall away like autumn leaves, roles you wore to be approved, beliefs you carried to feel safe. You realize they were never who you are. They were scaffolds for a chapter that has completed. Now your soul is asking you to live without armor, to walk lightly, to trust the quiet. You stop chasing identity, and identity stops chasing you. There's nothing left to defend, only space to remember. With this shift comes a subtle expansion in the body. Some nights you wake up, breathing easier than you have in years. Your nervous system begins to unwind. Muscles unclench without permission. The heart moves from defense to openness, almost shy at first. Like a flower testing sunlight, healing stops, feeling like effort. It becomes a natural recalibration, life restoring balance when you stop interrupting the process. This is energetic self-calibration, not fixing, but allowing. As you soften, relationships change. People who once drained you drift gently to the edges. Those who resonate arrive with perfect timing, not because you hunted for them, but because energy seeks symmetry. Conversations accelerate growth. Collaboration feels effortless. And when connections dissolve, you don't cling. You recognize the purpose is complete. Like two birds sharing wind for a while, then turning toward different horizons. There is no betrayal in that. Only movement. Something curious happens around time as well. It stops feeling like a straight line. Some days it stretches, moments feel wide, almost eternal. Other days it compresses, events collapsing into perfect synchronicity. You begin sensing echoes from possible futures, memories from alternate choices. When you stabilize in presence, you stabilize across timelines you cannot see. Healing here becomes healing everywhere. It's not metaphor, it's physics hiding as poetry. And amidst all of this, manifestation transforms. You no longer chase outcomes, repeating affirmations like spells. Desire stops feeling like hunting. Instead, you become the condition that makes what you want inevitable. When intention and emotion harmonize at a high frequency, the universe rearranges itself, not through force, but through resonance. Things arrive quietly, perfectly timed, often through paths your rational mind could never design. That's because the field responds to who you are, not who you pretend to be. But there's a tenderness in this path. Moments when everything familiar dissolves: jobs, relationships, identities, plans. You watch them fall away like a building being intentionally dismantled. It feels like collapse, but it's purification. The universe removes structures built from fear. And in the silence after collapse, your ego whispers you have failed. Yet your higher self smiles, knowing this is the final lesson. Can you hold alignment when nothing external confirms your worth? If you can remain open in heartbreak, compassionate in disappointment, still in uncertainty, you unlock something extraordinary. Your peace becomes authority. Not authority over others, but authority over your field. When you walk into a room, tension dissolves. Systems stuck in stagnation begin to flow. People breathe deeper and don't know why. Because coherence is contagious. Harmony is distributed through presence, not performance. This is where service becomes natural, not charity, not sacrifice. Service becomes design. Energy circulates through you, not from obligation, but from overflow. You give effortlessly because you are not giving away something, you are keeping the field in motion. And the universe returns every pulse multiplied, not as reward, but as equilibrium. Over time, spirituality becomes simple. Ordinary moments become sacred. Washing dishes, listening deeply, walking through a grocery store, you begin to feel the space between interactions, humming with intelligence. Silence speaks louder than words. You stop preaching and start embodying. People don't listen to what you say. They listen to how your presence feels. And that feeling teaches without language. The ego does not disappear. It integrates. It becomes a gentle tool instead of a frightened commander. You stop trying to escape your humanity. You understand the purpose is not to transcend matter, but to illuminate it. Your body becomes a temple of transmission, every cell pulsing with coherence. Healing accelerates not because you demand it, but because resistance dissolves. As you live from this state, freedom takes on new meaning. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom within responsibility. You're not controlling outcomes. You're maintaining frequency. Life becomes a partnership. You play your part with clarity, and the universe orchestrates the rest with mathematical elegance. Eventually, no one can tell you're awakened, and that is the sign of completion. Enlightenment becomes intimacy with the ordinary. You speak simpler, love deeper, judge less. Power and compassion sit at the same table. Your influence is silent but unmistakable. So if you're feeling this shift, if your breath has slowed and your chest has softened while listening, understand, you are not becoming something new. You are remembering something ancient. The field is not outside of you. It breathes through you. Your vibration writes instructions into matter. And the moment you choose coherence right now, the universe bends gently, respectfully, around that choice. Stay open. Stay present. Trust the current, like a river returning to the sea. Nothing can stop what is already destined to flow. And in that quiet realization, You finally understand. The universe never responded to your struggle. It responded to your state. It always has. 1. Probability navigation. There comes a point on this path where choices no longer feel like mental puzzles. They no longer ask you to weigh pros and cons, scribble out lists, or wrestle with endless what-ifs in the middle of the night. Instead, they begin to whisper through sensation, through the quiet shift in your chest, through the subtle opening or tightening behind your ribs. At this level of consciousness, probability navigation is not about predicting the future. It's about feeling the most coherent outcome before it arrives. You experience a deeper intelligence moving beneath your thoughts, one that doesn't argue or analyze. It simply knows. You might notice this in everyday moments. Someone invites you into a project that looks perfect. On paper, good money, good people, good timing, yet something inside you feels heavy, like gravity doubled. Your mind may insist, this makes sense, but your body quietly says, not this. We've been conditioned to ignore that signal, to override the quiet with the loud, but the body doesn't lie. Coherence is not intellectual, it's electromagnetic. When something aligns with your evolution, your inner field expands, breath deepens, tension melts. It feels like the door that was already waiting for you. Probability navigation is the art of reading that expansion. In the old paradigm, we acted out of fear of missing out, grasping, pushing, trying to collect every experience so we wouldn't be left behind. But fear contracts possibilities. Fear narrows the lens. When you choose from fear, you are choosing from a version of yourself that believes life is scarce and unpredictable. The universe mirrors that belief with results that feel scattered or unstable. But when you move from clarity, the field opens like a hallway of doors, each revealing a version of your future. Some versions feel dense, tight, and demanding. Others feel spacious, light, and strangely familiar. That familiarity is not coincidence. It is recognition your energy, remembering itself in a future it has already visited. As consciousness deepens, you begin to sense this landscape long before you walk through it. You feel the direction of your next chapter not as thought, but as texture. Smooth means aligned. Rough means distortion. When life squeezes you, you no longer collapse into panic. You breathe and wait, because you've learned that what feels like pressure today may be the force that aligns you tomorrow. Most people never learn this skill. They chase outcomes with logic as their compass, forgetting that logic is built from the past. It cannot see possibility. It can only compare memories. But you're not here to repeat what you already know. You are here to navigate futures you haven't tasted yet, and the only instrument sensitive enough to detect them is your awareness. Think of probability like a river delta, many channels weaving through the terrain, each one leading to a different ocean of outcomes. Your beliefs determine which channels open. Your emotions determine which speed you travel. And your consciousness determines whether you fight the current or allow the flow. When you're coherent, you're not hoping to find the right path. You become the path. Life adjusts around you, like water reorganizing itself around the moon's pull. That's why decisions that once took months now resolve in seconds. It's not impatience, it's clarity. The mind used to debate, the body now decides. And every time you trust that subtle shift, your field grows stronger. You stop asking, what if I make the wrong choice? Because you realize wrong choices don't exist. Only different lessons, different timelines. Some are gentle, some are blunt, but all of them teach. Over time, you notice something else. Probabilities reveal themselves through resonance. A conversation lands softer than expected. A stranger speaks the sentence you needed to hear. An idea arrives while you're washing dishes or standing at a crosswalk. These are not random moments. They're coordinates. They map the geometry of your evolution. And when you listen, life becomes choreography. When you ignore, life becomes correction. The universe doesn't punish, it redirects. And as you deepen into this navigation, fear begins to dissolve. Not because you become fearless, but because you become rooted. You no longer rush decisions to escape discomfort. You sit with them until the energy reveals itself. Sometimes, waiting is the decision. Sometimes silence is the answer. Because probability navigation is not about forcing outcomes, it's about feeling the future, forming in real time. There will be days when everything slows down, when opportunities pause, when relationships slip quietly into the background. This is not stagnation, it's recalibration. The field is aligning you with a probability that requires more clarity. One breath of doubt can close a door. One breath of trust can open 10 more. That's how delicate coherence is. And that's how powerful you are. Eventually, the mind grows humble. It stops demanding guarantees before you leap. It becomes a translator rather than a dictator. You begin choosing paths that feel alive, not paths that look impressive. And you learn to recognize subtle warning signs, the tone behind a promise, the tension in a handshake, the silence after a question. Probability is not read through language. It's read through energy. As this mastery integrates, your external life simplifies. You say no without guilt. You say yes without hesitation. You understand that some invitations are bridges, while others are anchors. Some people are accelerators, while others are tests of discernment, and neither is wrong. Both serve your expansion. This clarity changes your relationship with time. You no longer panic when plans shift or doors close. You feel the reorganization happening behind the scenes. Like an architect adjusting blueprints, the universe rearranges timelines to match your frequency. But it will not force you into a higher outcome. It waits for your coherence. It waits for alignment. It waits for readiness. Probability navigation is the quiet confidence that life is not happening to you. But with you, it's the recognition that tension is feedback, intuition is data, and discomfort is a doorway. When your body whispers not here, listen. When your heart expands at the thought of a direction, follow. When silence lingers after an invitation, trust it. People may call this luck, talent, or coincidence, but you know it's geometry, the mathematics of consciousness moving beneath emotion. You sense which paths carry flow, and which carry friction. You know when to speak, when to wait, and when to walk away. You understand that every timeline has a frequency signature, and yours magnetizes to the one that honors growth. And ultimately, probability navigation is not about controlling outcomes. It's about becoming so coherent that the highest probability becomes unavoidable. It's letting life unfold through intuition rather than being strangled by fear. It's learning to breathe through uncertainty, soften into ambiguity, and feel the shape of what wants to emerge. When you live this way, something beautiful happens. Regret evaporates. You stop wondering, what if I chose differently, because you trust the intelligence behind every pull and push. You trust the whispers that guided you, and you trust that even the storms were currents, carrying you toward a horizon you couldn't yet see. Navigate by feeling, not fear. Listen to expansion, not urgency. Allow coherence. Don't chase control, because the universe is always speaking, and when your vibration stabilizes, its language becomes unmistakable. 2. Information field access. There comes a moment on this path when intuition stops feeling like a lucky guess or a mysterious hunch. It matures into something quieter, clearer, more consistent. You begin to notice that ideas arrive not as fragments, but as sentences fully formed. Solutions appear without you wrestling with them. It feels less like you're learning and more like you're remembering, like reaching into a pocket and finding something you forgot you placed there, that is the early signature of accessing the information field. Most of us are raised to believe the brain is the storage unit of all knowledge, like a library we fill through study and repetition. But the deeper you move into awareness, the more obvious it becomes. The brain is not the library, it is the librarian. The library itself is non-local, woven into the fabric of reality, pulsing quietly beneath physical form. Information isn't stored in synapses, it's stored in frequency. And when your vibration becomes coherent enough, you don't retrieve knowledge, you tune to it. This is why the greatest insights arrive when you stop trying. They appear while riding a bus, standing in the shower, or resting your forehead in your palms. It's not coincidence, it's access. When thinking relaxes its grip, the channel opens. The human mind, bless it, is loud and frightened. It tries to solve problems by pushing harder, but consciousness solves problems by allowing more. When you first notice this shift, it can feel surreal. You find yourself understanding dynamics you've never studied, or speaking truths you've never read. You might describe something to a friend, and they look at you as if you've just returned from a secret seminar. But the knowledge didn't come from outside. It came from inside the field. The information was always there. You were simply too noisy to hear it. Think of the information field as an ocean. Every thought, ever thought, every invention, still waiting to be born. Every solution to every problem floats within it. Most people stand on the shore, dipping a toe or collecting seashells. But when consciousness stabilizes, you begin swimming. You don't ask the waves to deliver ideas to you. You go where the water holds them. And here is the gentle paradox. The field does not respond to desperation. It responds to clarity. When you grasp at answers, the signal distorts. When you soften, the water clears. Insight rises like a fish breaking the surface, not summoned, but noticed. You might find that when someone asks you a question, you pose, not because you don't know, but because you're listening not to your memory, but to the space beneath your thoughts. And then the answer arrives, not word by word, but as a complete shape. All you do is unwrap it into language. This is not imagination. It's reception. The mind tends to take credit for things it merely downloads. It beams with pride and claims ownership. But the deeper truth is humbling. You are not the creator of the insight. You are the translator. As you travel further into this awareness, you'll notice that knowledge no longer feels like a possession. It becomes a responsibility. You realize that some information is not for your personal gain, but for collective evolution. When the field trusts your integrity, it shares more, not as prize, but as necessity. And the opposite is also true. If your intentions are tangled, if you want insight to manipulate, to boast, to dominate, the channel narrows. The signal grows static, not out of punishment, but protection. Power without maturity harms more than it heals. When your heart becomes clean and quiet, the information becomes crisp. Imagine sitting at a table with an elder, someone who has lived enough life to speak simply. They don't rush. They don't decorate their sentences. They speak from essence, not intellect. That is what field access feels like. Not flashy, not dramatic, just unmistakably true. You begin to sense that thoughts are less like commands and more like tuning forks. When you hold a question lightly, without impatience, a sympathetic vibration echoes back. Answers arrive on the same frequency as the question. Angry questions return. Angry answers. Fearful questions return fearful possibilities. But when you ask with curiosity, the universe responds with clarity. This skill deepens slowly. At first, you only catch glimpses. A sudden insight lands in your chest, and you think, where did that come from? Later, streams of understanding run through you, like water through open hands. Eventually, The channel becomes steady, like a river flowing toward the sea. But you must learn to distinguish between noise and knowing. Noise is urgent, emotional, demanding. It arrives in the mind and shouts. Knowing is calm, steady, quiet. It arrives in the chest and waits. Noise argues for its importance. Knowing needs no argument. It simply is. When you act on knowing, life aligns effortlessly. Doors open before you knock. Support arrives without request. Conversations deliver the code you needed. And when you act from noise, life becomes friction. You force what doesn't fit. You chase what runs. You argue with your own nervous system. Over time, you learn to trust the whisper more than the roar. Some days, the information you receive won't make sense, not immediately. It may guide you to end something that looks promising, or begin something that feels uncertain. It may ask you to rest when logic demands action, or to speak when silence seems safer. But hindsight, like sunrise, illuminates what darkness concealed. And the field rarely offers explanation. It offers direction. One of the most painful lessons on this journey is recognizing how often your mind interfered with guidance you already felt. You can probably look back and count the times you said, "I knew I shouldn't have done that." That knowing wasn't hindsight. It was access. You just didn't trust it then. But forgiveness is part of growth. As your coherence strengthens, you stop needing so many signs, omens, synchronicities. You start trusting the quiet well inside you. External confirmations become gentle reminders, not lifelines. And here is where a subtle humility blossoms. You realize you are not special for accessing the field. You are simply open. This capacity is built into human consciousness. The tragedy is not that few receive it. The tragedy is that few believe it's theirs. As this capability integrates, relationships shift. People may come to you for guidance, sensing something steady in you. Their questions pull insight through you, shaping language you didn't know you had. And afterward, you might sit alone and think, where did that come from? That is the field speaking through you, not to you. Eventually, you notice that reading books, while still enjoyable, begins to feel different. Information no longer accumulates in layers. It activates recognition. You don't feel impressed. You feel remembered. The words on the page point to something already alive in you, like a finger pointing toward a moon hanging in your own sky. And as your trust deepens, silence becomes a teacher, not absence, presence. You begin to listen between thoughts, sensing the subtle hum beneath reality. It's like tuning an old radio, gently rotating the dial until static dissolves. There's one more truth hidden here, and most miss it. The field doesn't care about your questions. It cares about your frequency. You receive not what you desire, but what you match. A frantic mind cannot perceive subtlety. A burdened heart cannot hold nuance. But a coherent field can translate possibility into form. So, when you can't hear the answer, don't shout louder. Become quieter. When you can't see the path, don't run faster. Become still. The information is already there. You're not waiting for it to arrive. It's waiting for you to align. And when alignment happens, insight dawns not like lightning sudden and violent, but like sunrise gradual, warm, inevitable. At first, a soft glow on the horizon. Then, color. Then, clarity. Nothing has changed. Yet everything is visible. This is the gentle revolution of consciousness. You are no longer learning. You are remembering. You are no longer seeking. You are receiving. You are no longer thinking. You are knowing, and the deeper the trust, the clearer the channel. Remain open. Remain honest. Remain humble. Because the field shares its secrets with those who can hold them with compassion, not those who would use them to shine, but those who would use them to illuminate. And in that quiet exchange between your breath and the infinite reality, reorganizes itself, not around your fear, but around your frequency. That is information field access. And it changes everything. 3. Coherent manifestation. There comes a season in your inner evolution when manifestation no longer feels like reaching for something beyond your grasp. You stop begging reality to change. You stop pleading with the universe to notice you. And you stop performing rituals with fear quietly tied to the back of your intentions. Instead, something softer happens. You begin to realize that the universe isn't a storehouse where you place orders. It is a mirror, an intelligent ego, responding faithfully to the frequency you embody, not the frequency you advertise. Most people try to manifest from the mind. They repeat affirmations like incantations, visualize with their jaw clenched, and hope the universe won't notice the tremor of doubt behind their voice. But coherent manifestation is different. It does not respond to words. It responds to congruence. When your emotion and intention move as one, when your internal signals agree, reality doesn't see your desire as distant. It recognizes it as an extension of you. Imagine a tree yearning to produce fruit. It doesn't beg the soil or negotiate with the sun. It simply aligns its inner processes, nutrients, light, water. Growth and fruit becomes a natural outcome. Similarly, when your internal world becomes coherent, the external world stops resisting. Doors open not because you forced them, but because you became the person who walks through them. This coherence begins with honesty, not with others, but with yourself. You cannot manifest abundance while secretly believing you are undeserving. You cannot manifest love while quietly fearing intimacy. You cannot manifest peace while clinging to chaos. The field does not hear your affirmations. It hears the vibration beneath them. The mismatch is what delays outcomes. The alignment is what accelerates them. When your inner state is fractured, reality tries to protect you. It slows down manifestation so you don't collapse under the weight of your own wish. Not out of cruelty, but compassion, like a wise parent, withholding freedom until a child can wield it safely. But when you finally embody the frequency of what you've asked for, life stops withholding. It begins delivering. This is why coherent manifestation often feels effortless. People who live in this state do not chase. They do not argue their worth. They do not monitor results from hour to hour. They trust the field like they trust their own heartbeat. The less they cling, the more they receive, not because surrender is a loophole, but because grasping is interference. Think of desire as a tuning fork. The moment emotion-ridden longing hits reality, two questions are asked. Do you truly believe this is yours? And who will you be once you have it? If your identity remains anchored in lack, the universe cannot resonate with your request. But when you become the version of yourself who already holds the experience, desire stops. Echoing outward, it returns. In coherent manifestation, the feeling precedes the evidence. You don't wait for the world to confirm your worth. You feel worthy. And the world simply reflects what you've already decided. That's the quiet genius of vibration. You'll notice the shift through small things first. The right person arriving at the exact moment. The email that lands hours after you softened into trust. The conversation you needed overheard in a grocery aisle. These are reality's first ripples. Not fireworks, but fingerprints. And as you deepen, synchronicity becomes a language. But this path asks something of you. It asks you to release urgency. Urgency is the offspring of fear, and fear contracts the field. Coherence requires spaciousness. It requires the courage to not chase, the humility to let timing choose itself. When you try to force manifestation, you are telling the universe you do not trust its precision. And what you do not trust You cannot receive. Many people mistake control for power, but true power is influence through resonance. It's like standing in a room and watching others breathe slower simply because you are calm. You didn't command them. You didn't convince them. You aligned yourself so fully with peace that peace spilled outward. In manifestation, this means you don't manifest money. You manifest the version of you who feels safe around money. You don't manifest love, you manifest the version of you who can be loved without shrinking. You don't manifest purpose. You manifest the version of you who no longer hides from what calls your name. Reality is always responding to identity. And here's the part that takes time to swallow: the universe never gives you what you want. It gives you what you are. Wanting signals distance. Becoming signals readiness. Once you embody the frequency of already having won, reality cannot withhold. That would break its most fundamental law. This is why old desires begin to dissolve as you grow. The cravings that once kept you awake at night lose their flavor, not because you no longer deserve them, but because your consciousness outgrew the hunger that created them. You stop manifesting to fill holes. You manifest to express fullness. Eventually, manifestation stops feeling like magic. It feels like symmetry. When your inner geometry matches the geometry of what you ask for, they converge, not as miracle, but as math. This coherence creates strange side effects. Opportunities find you. Strangers feel familiar. Your timing becomes impeccable. You speak less, but your presence says more. You become a tuning fork for possibility, and the universe hums in agreement. Yet, even here, there is simplicity. You don't need exotic rituals. You don't need endless practices. Coherent manifestation is not about adding more. It's about removing interference, doubt, fear, unworthiness, impatience, pressure. When those dissolve, clarity emerges, and clarity is magnetic. Sometimes coherence feels like doing nothing, like leaving certain messages unanswered, or turning down a tempting offer that smells like scarcity. Like going to bed, instead of forcing yourself awake to push harder. To the untrained eye, this looks passive, but in truth, it's precision. You are learning to spend energy only where resonance lives. Over time, you begin to see a deeper pattern. The universe never denied you. It only protected you from your lower timelines. What felt like rejection was redirection. What felt like delay was alignment. What felt like emptiness was preparation. And when coherence finally settles into your bones, something delicate unfolds. You stop manifesting from wounds. You start creating from wholeness. You trust the timing of your life more than the timeline of your ego. People often ask, how do I know when I'm in coherence? You'll know when desire feels peaceful instead of desperate. When your chest expands instead of tightens. When you can imagine the outcome and feel gratitude instead of tension. When you no longer feel the need to prove. When silence feels like progress. That's coherence. So breathe. Let the universe meet you halfway. Allow the fruit to ripen on its own vine. Don't shake the branch. Become the tree. Your desire is not a destination, it's a frequency. And once you embody it, reality bows back. In the end, coherent manifestation is not about acquiring more. It is about becoming more honest, more open, more aligned, not louder, but clearer. Because the universe is not listening to your voice. It's listening to your vibration. And when both speak the same language, manifestation is no longer pursuit. It becomes arrival. 4. Energetic self-calibration. There is a quiet turning point on this path, when healing stops, feeling like something you must chase, fix, or force. You wake up one morning and realize your body has been repairing itself in the background without your permission, without your strategies, without your constant effort. It feels almost strange at first, like a deep exhale after years of holding your breath. Muscles soufflent, Sleep grows thicker and darker. The heart moves with less urgency, as if it finally remembers it is not being chased. This is the beginning of energetic self-calibration, the subtle but powerful moment when your inner field stops fighting and starts aligning. For most of your life, you may have believed healing required effort. You pushed yourself into routines, diets, affirmations, schedules. You treated recovery like a task. As if your wounds were misbehaving children, you needed to discipline, but the body does not heal through force. It heals through safety. And safety arrives only when you release the grip of control. At this stage, your nervous system, once wired for survival, starts to reprogram itself. Not because you demanded it, but because the danger you were defending yourself against has dissolved. Trauma is not just memory. It is posture. It is breath held high in the chest. It is the jaw that never unclenches. It is the shoulders that curve inward to protect a heart that once learned the world was sharp. But when coherence settles into your cells, posture unwinds, breath drops lower, your body opens like a flower that finally senses it is spring. People will notice this before you do. They may comment that your presence feels calmer, your voice softer, your gaze steadier. They won't know what changed because the change is internal, like a house whose foundation was quietly rebuilt while the occupants slept. Outwardly, nothing looks different. Inwardly, everything has shifted. Energetic self-calibration is the intelligence of your field reorganizing itself around your new frequency. Imagine thousands of threads that were once tangled, pulling against each other. Over time, they smooth out, run parallel, and carry information with less friction. Thoughts become clearer. Emotions move through you rather than take residence in you. You stop clinging to narratives that once defined you because they no longer resonate with the state you now embody. With this shift comes a deeper understanding of rest. In the old paradigm, rest felt like weakness. You pushed yourself past exhaustion because you believed productivity equaled worth. But now you see the truth. Exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It is a sign of disconnection. And rest is not retreat. It is recalibration. Sleep becomes the nightly update of your operating system, and dreams become the workshop where subconscious fragments are stitched back into wholeness. Don't be surprised if your sleep deepens in this phase. It is not laziness. It is integration. As the inner environment stabilizes, the outer world responds, almost eerily. Conflicts seem to resolve without confrontation. Problems either dissolve or reveal solutions you couldn't see before. People who once triggered your nervous system begin to feel like background noise rather than threats. You might think life has become easier, but the truth is simpler. You have become clearer. Energy is geometry. When your internal geometry was chaotic, the world mirrored chaos back to you. When your internal geometry becomes coherent, circumstances reorganize according to that harmony. You don't attract peace. You generate it. And reality synchronizes like iron filings, aligning under a magnet. At this point, you may begin to notice small signals of this calibration. The body releases tension in random moments, standing at the sink, tying a shoe, sitting in a quiet room. A sudden exhale escapes you, longer than usual. Your shoulders drop, the chest softens. These are not accidents. They are your field, letting go of frequencies that no longer match your state. Healing becomes less dramatic. There are fewer breakdowns, fewer emotional storms. Instead, it feels like gentle weather, soft rain, varm brezes, gradual shifts. Your nervous system is no longer bracing for lightning. It trusts the forecast. One of the strangest experiences here is the absence of urgency. You stop rushing to answer messages. You stop apologizing for needing time. Time itself begins to stretch, not because you have more of it, but because you are no longer leaking energy through worry. And when energy stops leaking, you suddenly discover reservoirs of strength you didn't know you had. Don't be surprised if your habits change. Food cravings soften. You drink more water without thinking. You find yourself drawn to sunlight, to silence, to slower mornings. Your body is guiding you back to equilibrium. It has always known the way. It simply needed you to stop interrupting. As you calibrate, your immune system strengthens. It recognizes when to fight and when to rest. This balance is intelligence. Too much fight becomes inflammation. Too much rest becomes stagnation. Calibration is not a static state. It is a dance. Your field constantly adjusts, listens, feels, and responds. At a deeper level, emotions begin to behave differently. In the past, sadness might have dragged you into weeks of heaviness. Now it moves through you like weather arriving, raining, clearing. Anger no longer explodes outward. It delivers information, then leaves. Pain becomes quieter. Not because life hurts less, but because your resistance hurts less. You start to realize that the field has been recalibrating you through every heartbreak, setback, delay, and disappointment you ever endured. These weren't failures. They were pressure systems shaping you into coherence. The body learns through contrast. The soul learns through compassion. And there's another truth most miss. When the inner field stabilizes, toxic patterns simply don't hold. You'll feel repelled by environments and relationships that once felt familiar. Not with bitterness, just neutrality. You'll walk away, not because you're angry, but because the vibration no longer matches. Calibration creates boundaries without needing boundaries. Over time, your intuition shifts from voice to sensation. It no longer speaks in urgent whispers. It speaks through peace. If something makes your body tense, that is information. If something makes your breath deepen, that is invitation. Energetic self-calibration also changes how you use language. You stop defending yourself. You stop oversharing. Silence becomes a container instead of a void. You speak only when your words can adjust the field rather than disturb it. People may wonder how you've suddenly become so calm. They may ask if you're doing anything different. But how do you explain the quiet miracle of becoming unshaken by things that once terrified you? How do you describe a storm that now reigns over you rather than through you? You don't need to explain. Your presence is explanation enough. As coherence deepens, life feels less like a battle you must win, and more like a river that carries you exactly where you were always meant to go. Healing becomes less about removing pain and more about removing the resistance to pain. Growth becomes less about becoming someone new and more about remembering who you were before fear began carving its initials into your ribs. Energetic self-calibration does not make you invincible. You will still feel. You will still cry. But you won't drown. Pain will become a visitor instead of a roommate. You'll learn to sit with it, listen to it, and let it go when the message is delivered. And perhaps the greatest gift of this stage is that your body becomes your friend. You stop punishing it. You stop ignoring its signals. You learn its language, a subtle vocabulary of tension, warmth, contraction, opening. Every sensation becomes feedback from the field, adjusting you, aligning you. In time, you will look back on the days you clenched your jaw and forced your healing and feel a tender sadness, not because you regret it, but because you'll understand how hard you were trying to survive. Now, you are learning how to live. Release the grip. Trust the quiet. Let your field do what it was designed to do. Because healing is not an achievement, it is a return home. And when the inner landscape becomes peaceful, the outer world rearranges itself like constellations, responding to a new gravity, a gravity born from coherence, safety, and the gentle, unwavering truth that you are no longer at war with yourself. 5. Identity shedding. There is a quiet unraveling that happens on this path. One that doesn't arrive with fireworks or heroic announcements. It comes softly, like a morning fog lifting. revealing parts of the landscape you didn't realize were always there. You start to notice that the ambitions which once drove you so fiercely begin to feel distant, like music bleeding from a room you no longer stand inside. The hunger to impress, to be seen, to be validated, slowly dissolves, not because you've given up, but because something deeper is waking. For most of your life, you were taught that identity is something you must build brick by brick. A reputation, a story, a role. You gathered labels like armor, the helper, the achiever, the caretaker, the strong one. You clung to them because the world applauded them. But beneath each label was a quiet tension, the fear that without these costumes, you might disappear. And then, one day, you feel it. The threads holding those costumes in place begin to loosen. The mask no longer fits your face. The script no longer fits your voice. The applause no longer fits your heart. It's not that you fail to care. It's that you no longer care from fear. You've simply outgrown the costume. This shedding can feel disorienting at first. You might wake up and wonder why the things that mattered yesterday feel empty today. You might walk into a room and sense the echo of who you used to be, but no longer feel compelled to perform. You might even mourn parts of yourself that are falling away, not because they were ever truly you, but because they were familiar. Identity shedding is not the destruction of self. It's the release of everything you built in order to survive. There's a tenderness in this dissolution. Old desires lose their gravity. The need to compete evaporates. The obsession with outcomes softens. You stop hustling for your worth. You realize worth was never something to earn. It was something to remember. And so you begin to return. Sometimes this return happens slowly. You notice you speak less, but your words carry more weight. You feel less urgency to defend your choices. You no longer bend yourself into shapes to fit rooms that were too small for you anyway. There is a kind of quiet confidence that emerges, not loud, not boastful, just steady. It feels like standing barefoot on earth after years of walking on concrete. Other times, the shedding is dramatic. Relationships fall away. Friendships fade. Careers collapse under the weight of their inauthenticity. People might tell you you've changed, but what they're really sensing is that you've stopped pretending. And when you stop pretending, the world mirrors that truth back to you with clarity, not comfort. Letting go of outdated identity feels like losing a home you never loved, but stayed in because it was warm. There's grief in the familiar, even when the familiar was suffocating. You might find yourself longing for old versions of you, the one who cared tirelessly, the one who worked relentlessly, the one who chased approval like oxygen. But longing isn't regression. It's simply memory passing through. As layers fall off, you might feel naked, vulnerable in spaces where you once felt armored. You might feel misunderstood, even by those closest to you. But the misunderstanding is not evidence of error. It's evidence of evolution. You're not becoming harder. You're becoming truer. It's important to understand identity shedding doesn't mean you become someone new. It means you resist less of who you have always been. The more layers you remove, the lighter you feel. The lighter you feel, the more truth can move through you. Old patterns that once defined you, people-pleasing, overthinking, perfectionism, begin to fall away, not through discipline, but irrelevance. They no longer match the frequency of your nervous system. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. It doesn't rip or tear or fight the process. The skin simply becomes too tight. Life pulls you toward expansion, and expansion cannot happen in shrinking costumes. And here's where many become frightened when an old identity dies. There is an empty space before the new coherence arrives. The void can feel terrifying. It's the space between seasons. The winter before spring remembers its script, but the void is sacred. It is where the soil rests, where seeds gestate underground. Identity shedding is not absence, it's incubation. In this void, Silence becomes the teacher. Without the noise of who you thought you had to be, you hear whispers of who you truly are. You begin to realize you don't need to impress the room. You need to impress your integrity. You don't need to win arguments. You need to win alignment. You don't need to chase belonging. You need to belong to yourself. As this integration deepens, something beautiful unfolds. You start to make decisions without fear of judgment. You speak your truth without rehearsing it. You create without asking permission. You walk away when your nervous system says no. That voice you once dismissed as unreasonable becomes your compass. There is a softness here too. You stop forcing your opinions onto others. You understand that everyone is walking their own spiral of becoming. You offer compassion instead of critique because you remember how painful it was to carry identities that weren't yours. External achievements, once bright and shiny, begin to feel flat if they require you to betray yourself. Success transforms from something you chase to something you express. It becomes less about applause and more about alignment. In this stage, you might notice your body changing. Posture straightens. The breath deepens. The face softens. Because the body remembers your essence before the world taught it tension. Identity shedding is cellular, not cerebral. We often ask, who am I becoming? But the wiser question is, who am I allowing myself to be? Your essence was never lost. It was buried beneath expectations, culture, fear. Shedding identity is the excavation of truth. You will know this stage is integrating when you stop trying to prove, persuade, perform. Peace becomes the proof. Presence becomes the persuasion. Integrity becomes the performance. Old versions of you might still appear in moments of stress. That's okay. Healing is not deletion. It is relationship. When those old patterns knock, you don't kick them out. You let them sit. Offer them tea. Thank them for how they protected you. And watch them leave. Identity shedding matures into compassion, first for yourself, then for others. You recognize the masks others wear, not with judgment, but understanding. You know how heavy they are. You wore them too. Eventually, you will look in the mirror and see eyes not hardened by survival, but softened by return. You'll see a face that no longer strains toward the future or flinches at the past. You'll see someone fully alive in the present moment, unburdened by performance. And when you reach that place, life begins responding differently. Opportunities align with authenticity. Relationships deepen without negotiation. Creativity flows without blockage. The world meets you where you meet yourself. Because identity shedding reveals the simplest truth. You were never meant to become more. You were meant to become less afraid, less armored, less edited. What remains is essence, and essence is untouchable. Let the old identities fall like leaves, not because they were wrong, but because their season is over. And as each leaf lands gently on the ground, you'll realize you are not dying. You are remembering. Chasse, temporal fluidity. There comes a moment along the inner path when your relationship with time begins to shift. It's subtle at first, like noticing the tide changing by the coolness of morning air, rather than by watching waves rise. You begin to feel that time is not moving past you in a single straight line, but unfolding around you, like a field that you stand inside. The future stops being a distant horizon you're running toward, and the past stops being a weight dragging behind you. They both soften into something more porous, more fluid, more responsive. Most people live as though time is a conveyor belt, moving forward relentlessly, carrying them in one direction, whether they resist or not. They define themselves by what has already happened and fear what might come next. But when consciousness settles, you start to perceive time differently. It becomes less like a line and more like a room, a space in which you can choose to shift your posture, breathe deeper, and influence what appears around you. This is temporal fluidity, The quiet understanding that the decisions you make today are not isolated moments, but ripples across a vast ocean of probability. You may notice that when your inner state is chaotic, events outside of you seem tangled. Conversations become misunderstandings. Plans fall apart. Opportunities feel far away. And when your inner state is calm, things line up with elegant precision. People arrive exactly when needed. Solutions appear out of nowhere. Doors open with the gentleness of wind, pushing a curtain aside. It's not coincidence. It's coherence bending time toward clarity. When you drop a stone into still water, the ripples spread evenly in every direction. When you drop the same stone into churning water, the ripples distort. Time responds the same way. Your emotional state becomes the water's clarity. Calmness allows energy to travel cleanly, shaping not just your next step, but hundreds of parallel possibilities. There's a strange comfort in knowing that when you choose peace, you aren't just helping the version of you sitting in this chair, breathing right now. You are helping the versions of you who will wake tomorrow, next week, and years from now. Peace is a frequency that travels across timelines. The stability you cultivate today is inherited by the you that will face storms later. And though it sounds abstract, you feel it in your bones. Some days, your choices feel heavier than others, not because they are bigger, but because they have more branches on the tree of possibility. You feel the weight of them, the way a musician feels the silence before a note. And sometimes, choosing not to act is the most aligned action of all. Most people become anxious when they feel stuck, but stillness is not stagnation. It is recalibration. Imagine a massive clockwork adjusting its gears so that every tooth fits perfectly. The pause you feel is not life withholding, it is life aligning. This is the architecture of temporal fluidity. Time rearranges itself when your field becomes coherent. As this understanding deepens, you'll notice something else. Moments of intuition begin to arrive out of order. You might feel sadness before a goodbye, gratitude before a meeting, peace before things resolve. That's because your awareness has expanded into multiple coordinates at once. You are sensing the emotional signature of outcomes before they physically manifest. This can be confusing if you expect time to behave linearly, but when time becomes space, feelings become maps. You might remember memories differently, not because they've changed, but because you have. When consciousness expands, the past is not erased. It is reinterpreted. Pain becomes teacher. Loss becomes redirection. Mistakes become data. As you shift, your relationship with the past shifts. Healing doesn't change what happened. It changes the version of you who is holding it. This is why forgiveness is not about letting someone else off the hook. It's about releasing the version of yourself trapped in the timeline of hurt. With temporal fluidity, you begin to sense future possibilities with quiet accuracy, not as predictions, but as textures. Some futures feel dense heavy in the chest. Others feel light expansive behind the sternum. This is not imagination. It's energetic forecasting. You're reading the emotional weather of what might be. The more coherent your field, the more probable the aligned timelines become. It's not about controlling outcomes. It's about becoming the version of yourself who naturally gravitates toward pathways of ease. And here's a truth. Many resist urgency collapses potential. When you rush, worry, or grasp, you contract the field. That contraction limits the number of doors available. But when you breathe, soften, and release the timeline, more possibilities emerge, like stars appearing when clouds drift apart. You will also notice time behaves differently depending on your state. When you are grounded, an hour feels spacious. When you are fractured, an hour feels suffocating. Time expands for presence and shrinks for panic. That is not psychological. It is electromagnetic. Your heart's rhythm influences how you metabolize experience. Eventually, You'll realize you can shape time by shaping your breath. A long exhale slows perception, widens awareness, and opens access to probabilities you couldn't see before. This is why calm people often appear lucky. Their field remains open long enough to notice opportunities racing by. And then something profound happens. You stop living life as a race against time. You begin partnering with it. You sense when to act, when to wait, and when to walk away. Some opportunities are premature, others are overdue. Temporal fluidity teaches you to honor the momentum of events rather than force them. In this stage, you might find that relationships end quietly, not because anyone is wrong, but because your timelines are no longer parallel. You may feel someone drifting months before anything physically changes. That awareness is not paranoia. It's resonance reading. Likewise, new relationships may feel strangely familiar, as if you've already shared years with someone you just met. That's because in some probability streams, time is not singular. It is layered, stacked like pages of a book you flip through by feeling rather than reading. As you integrate this, fear of the future dissolves. Uncertainty stops being a threat. It becomes potential open, malleable, shaped by presence. You no longer ask, "What will happen to me?" Instead, you ask, "Who am I becoming as it happens?" And that shift changes everything. You realize your job is not to predict the wave, but to steady your board. When fear contracts, the field closes like a fist. When peace expands, it opens like a palm. The openness is what allows guidance to land. Over time, you will notice that the smaller your inner storms, the larger your outer freedoms. That is the paradox. Those who control the timeline inside their nervous system influence timelines outside their circumstances. Temporal fluidity means you start living less in reaction and more in synchronization. You stop forcing doors open and begin recognizing the ones that unlock as you approach. You stop fighting delays and start noticing what's being prepared behind them. The field never wastes time. Only the mind does. And maybe the most beautiful realization is this: every breath you take from coherence doesn't just calm your present self. It stabilizes thousands of versions of you branching forward. Peace ripples outward, not metaphorically, but physically through the quantum fabric of possibility. So when you choose silence over argument, compassion over pride, presence over panic, you are not going nowhere. You are going everywhere more gently. Past, present, future, they are not separate rooms. They are furniture rearranging itself each time you exhale. And if you listen closely, you will hear time whisper, "You do not move through me. I move around you." This is temporal fluidity, the gentle, liberating truth that the calmer you become, the more timelines align in your favor. 7. Relationship orchestration. There comes a phase in your evolution when relationships stop feeling like accidents. The people who enter your life no longer appear because you pursued them, impressed them, or performed for them. They emerge like perfectly timed drum beats inside a song you didn't know you were writing. The rhythm surprises you at first. Someone arrives just as you're learning a difficult lesson. Another disappears the moment that lesson integrates. You begin to sense a deeper order beneath the surface, one that has nothing to do with charm, skill, or social strategy. It's resonance, frequency, alignment. For most of your life, you were taught that relationships happen through effort. You learned to shape yourself depending on who was watching. Like clay molded by approval, you learned to overgive to feel deserving, to hold tightly so things wouldn't slip away. But as you grow more coherent, relationships reorganize. You stop reaching for people. Instead, you become someone worth reaching toward. It's not arrogance, it's magnetism. And magnetism is not something you do, it's something you are when you're honest about your own frequency. The truth is simple. Energy recognizes energy. like tuning forks that hum at the same resonance. Two people, vibrating at similar states, begin to hear each other across crowded rooms, across miles, across lifetimes. You may meet a stranger and feel an inexplicable familiarity. As if you're continuing a conversation you both forgot you started. That familiarity is not logical, it's vibrational memory. When coherence settles into your field, relationships become less about possession and more about orchestration. Each person arrives to deliver something precise, a reflection, a skill, a wound, a reminder. Some stay for a chapter, others only for a page. But all are necessary. They are not interruptions. They are instructions. As your consciousness expands, neediness dissolves. Not because you stop longing for connection, but because you stop confusing connection with survival. You realize that relationships built on fear of loneliness are not love. They are agreements between wounds, but relationships built on resonance feel different. They are spacious. You don't cling. You don't chase. You simply witness each other's expansion. When relationships form at this frequency, communication becomes clearer. You speak less to be understood and more to understand. Conversations have fewer words but more weight. Silence becomes comfortable. You feel safe revealing your unpolished thoughts because the relationship isn't built on performance. It's built on presence. Not everyone can meet you here, and that's okay. Some people are tuned to different tempos. When you try to drag them into your rhythm, you disrupt the music, both theirs and yours. So instead of forcing harmony, you learn to listen. You learn to let people be who they are, where they are. That acceptance is not weakness, it's wisdom. As this orchestration becomes clearer, endings transform. You stop seeing goodbyes as failures. You stop resenting distance. You realize that when the lesson completes, the energy naturally dissolves, like mist fading as sunlight touches it. There is no need to cling. Love is not proven by duration. It's proven by authenticity. Sometimes the most loving act is releasing someone who no longer resonates with your trajectory. The ego hates this stage because the ego measures worth by attachment. It says, if they leave, something is wrong with me. But the soul knows better. It whispers, they came exactly when I needed them, and they left exactly when I no longer did. You learn to honor the timing instead of controlling the timeline. In time, you begin to feel the subtle pull of new relationships approaching before they arrive. You sense the field adjusting, weaving new threads toward your orbit. Maybe you start thinking about someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe you feel inspired to visit a place unexpectedly. Then suddenly, there they are. Not coincidence, coordination. You'll also notice that toxic dynamics lose their flavor. You no longer feel addicted to drama, shows, or emotional friction. The nervous system that once craved intensity now craves safety. The body that once felt alive through conflict now feels alive through peace. This is maturation, not retreat. People might tell you you've become distant, but what they're really sensing is that you've stopped watering weeds. You're learning to invest where there is reciprocity. You no longer pour oceans into thimbles. You understand that generosity without boundaries is self-abandonment. In coherent relationships, boundaries are not walls. They are tuning tools. You communicate where your energy leaks. You speak your truth without apology. And those who resonate will adjust not out of obligation, but because harmony feels better than dissonance. You also begin to see that love does not require sameness. Resonance is not identical notes. It's complementary notes. Harmony is created when differences align without distortion. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone to coexist with you. Completion was never the job of another human. It was the job of your own integration. And here's the secret. Most never-learned relationships are less about who you want and more about who you are. When you change your frequency, The cast around you changes. Some characters exit quietly. Others evolve beside you. New ones enter through doors you didn't know were open. As you move deeper into this orchestration, forgiveness becomes easier. You stop blaming people for not knowing how to love you when you didn't know how to love yourself. You see their actions as echoes of their wounds, not reflections of your worth. Compassion grows, not because you excuse behavior, but because you understand its origin. Eventually, jealousy fades too. You no longer compare your path to anyone else. You realize that connection is not competition. If someone leaves your life, it's because their resonance is required elsewhere. If someone stays, it's because their note harmonizes with your chord. Children understand this intuitively. They play, connect, drift, return, all without narrative. Adults forget and must relearn. Relationship orchestration is not a concept, it's a remembering. In this remembering, you will face moments of loneliness, not because you lack connection, but because you are cleaning the space around you for connections that match your next frequency. Loneliness is often a sign of upgrade, not deficiency. It is the silence before the drum beat. And when the next rhythm arrives, you'll know. The body will soften, conversation will feel effortless. There will be no confusion about where you stand. Resonance removes guesswork. When someone is meant to be in your orbit, you do not chase them, and they do not drift. With time, you begin to trust departures just as much as arrivals. Both are choreography, both are gifts, both adjust your field. You'll learn to bless the people who leave. You'll learn to bless the people who arrive. You'll learn to bless the people who stay, because each one is a messenger, carrying a fragment of the mirror you needed to see yourself more clearly. And at the deepest level, you realize something profound. Every relationship is a relationship with yourself, dressed as another person. Every conflict reveals where you are not yet at peace. Every attraction reveals where you are still unfolding. Every goodbye reveals where you are learning to release. Relationship orchestration is not about finding the perfect person. It's about tuning your field so precisely that only the aligned can hear your song. And as you mature, the song becomes simpler, less noise, more melody, less performative, more true. So allow the shifts, trust the timing. Let the ones who resonate find you. Let the ones who don't gently fade. You don't need to hold anything together. Harmony holds itself. When the lesson completes, the energy dissolves not because the love ends, but because the chapter does. And the truest relationships are not those that last forever, but those that leave you more whole than when they found you. The moment life begins to bloom around you, there comes a quiet morning, one that looks deceptively ordinary when you wake up and realize you are no longer wrestling with life. Something inside you loosens, like the final thread pulled from a knot that's lived in your chest for years. You notice the absence of urgency. You notice that the world outside hasn't changed. And yet, everything feels different. You sit with your breath and sense a new truth rising. You don't have to fight for what is already yours. You don't have to plead with the universe to see you. The universe has been watching you breathe since the beginning. For so long, you believed effort was the engine of destiny. You ran toward things you feared losing, chased moments you weren't ready for, and pulled on doors that were never meant to open. But now, you begin to understand life is not a staircase to be climbed. It is a field of resonance, and what blooms in your life is what matches the vibration of your heart. When your inner waters become still, the external world organizes around you with quiet precision. Conversations align. Opportunities arrive not with fireworks, but with perfect timing. People who resonate step into your orbit effortlessly. And chaos, the kind you once took personally, simply stops finding you. It's not because life has suddenly become gentle. It's because you have. This is the great shift. You stop forcing tomorrow into existence. You stop micromanaging destiny. You allow the future to emerge from the state you embody now. You finally see that all along. You were never shaping your life through action alone. You were shaping it through frequency. You feel it first in the heart. The edges soften. The tightness dissolves. It no longer beats like a fist, defending itself from the world. It opens like a palm keyet, receptive, sure, and the moment your heart softens, reality follows. It's as though every locked door senses your posture and unbolts itself. Then breath follows. You discover you're inhaling deeper without trying. Like your lungs have remembered a song they forgot. Each exhale carries away the echoes of battles you no longer need to fight. And as your breath deepens, probability bends, options unfold, time becomes generous. Instead of racing against life, you move with it. You stop sprinting and start gliding. Presence becomes your compass. You taste your food more slowly. You look at people longer. You pay attention to the space between sentences. Where truth hides, presence is not passivity. It is participation. When you show up fully, the universe responds with full attention. Cooperation replaces resistance. Support replaces strain. You begin to realize you don't need to pull anything toward you, not love, not purpose, not abundance. What is aligned already moves in your direction. Your only task is to vibrate at the level of what you desire. You don't push doors open anymore. You greet the ones that open as you approach. At this stage, ambition changes. It ceases to be a ladder and becomes a memory. You stop climbing toward worthiness. You remember that worthiness was the ground you started from. You stop chasing enlightenment. You remember the light you carried into this lifetime. You stop trying to become someone extraordinary. You remember you already were. And in this remembering, something dissolves. Comparison, competition, the sense that life is a race. You realize there is nothing to conquer, only something to return to. The journey is not vertical ascending rung by rung. It spirals inward, deeper into authenticity, deeper into presence, deeper into peace. You learn that peace is not found by eliminating difficulty. Peace is the ability to breathe in the middle of it. Peace is the acknowledgement that nothing external will stabilize you until your internal field is steady. And when that steadiness arrives, life bows in recognition. People may ask how you became so calm. They may want secrets, technique, shortcuts. But you know the truth. You stop pushing. You stopped trying to control outcomes with clenched fists. You started living from open palms. And everything changed. This doesn't mean your life becomes perfect. Storms still come. But you become the mountain instead of the tent pitched upon it. Wind no longer uproots you. Rain doesn't drown you. You've grown roots deeper than circumstance. And from these roots rises a gentle authority, not dominance, but presence. When you walk into rooms, the space shifts, not because you demand attention, but because you carry peace. You will feel something else too, a strange lightness, without the weight of proving, performing, pleasing, and perfecting. You are free in ways you never imagined. You laugh more softly. You speak more slowly. You forgive more quickly. You listen more deeply. Life stops being a test and becomes a dialogue. From here forward, decisions are guided not by fear, but by resonance. You stop choosing things that shrink you. You stop bargaining with your intuition. You start honoring the subtle no's and celebrating the quiet yeses. Life becomes choreography, and you are no longer stumbling. You are dancing. You come to understand that the universe was never withholding. It was waiting. Waiting for the frequency of your readiness. Waiting for the moment. You trusted enough to stop demanding, to stop begging, to stop bargaining. When you soften, the universe senses space to land. In this state, the concept of manifestation becomes almost humorous. You don't manifest fireworks. You manifest alignment. You don't chase outcomes. You become someone outcomes. Recognize. Goals no longer feel distant. They feel inevitable, not because you force them into form, but because you've become a match for their arrival. And finally, the most profound revelation arrives quietly. You are not here to become light. You are here to remember. You were never darkness. The shadows you carried were teachings, not truths. They shaped you not to break you, but to refine the frequency you now hold. So keep this frequency, protect it gently, feed it with silence, water it with honesty, let it bloom through breath, because reality listens to stability. When your energy stops shaking, the world feels safe enough to approach you with gifts you once chased. One day you will sit still, truly still, and realize there is nothing left to conquer. The world is not a mountain beneath your boot. It is a garden around your breath. Everything you ever wanted grows from within the soil of presence. When that day comes, you will not celebrate loudly. You will simply breathe, fully, deeply, gratefully, and in that breath you will understand the secret. Reality blooms around the heart that has returned home. So rest, become spacious, allow. There is nothing to chase, nothing to force, nothing to prove, only this moment, unfolding patiently, waiting for you to soften into it. And when you do, life bows, time expands, probability smiles, and you discover, with a quiet awe, all that was ever asked of you was to breathe, to be here, and to let the universe meet you where you finally stand still.